Okay. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry to interrupt this scintillating conversation. Um, yeah.
Let's bring it back. This is very special. We got over here.
We are we are learning Maseches Sanhedrin. We should be on Daf Nun Dalet. We're not. We're on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. We're about a third of the way down. The first words on the line are Mikol Makom. That was the last din that we just learned, that if for whatever reason we're functionally not able to perform the execution that the person deserved, so halacha gives us just free reign, that we can kill this person in any way we see fit, any way. There's no limits. You can kill them in any way you see fit. And all of this was actually part of a larger discussion between Reb Zera and Abaye in regards to the many punishments, I should say, where people are chayiv skila, and it doesn't say skila in the Torah, that it's learned out from Ovi Yidoni, but we didn't know which psukim, which part of the pasuk of Ovi Yidoni we were learning from. Was it the pasuk of Demehem Bam, or was it Bemos Yumsu? So that's kind of what we're picking up over here. The Gemara had said we learn it from Demehem Bam. Why is it that it's better to have learned it from the words Demehem Bam? So to this, the Gemara says, Amar le Rav Achami Difti le Ravina. Again, a third of the way down on Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. He said, V'i b'mos yumsu gamri. Had we not learned from Demehem Bam, when we are learning from Ovi Doni to the world of Skila, if we wouldn't have learned from the pasuk of Demehem Bam, and instead we learned b'mos yumsu, Maika Kashile, why didn't you like that approach? What's wrong with learning from there, right? There's many ways that we could learn halacha. So here, the Gemara had initially posited, this was the end of our shiur yesterday, that we learn from the world of Ovi Yidoni, which is chayiv skila, to other niskalim that they're chayiv skila, but we specifically use the words dmei and bum. So says the Gemara, Ilema, if you want to say that the reason why we don't want to learn from the psukim of Ovi Yidoni where it says b'mos yumsu, if you want to say it's because of Eshes Ish kakashele, where in Eshes Ish, typically the punishment is chenek, and maybe we should have said Lemesi Migbar Mos Yumas Me'ovi Yidoni, and maybe we would have learned out from the world of Ovi Yidoni to Eshes Ish that it isn't chenek, Malahalan Beskila, just like by Ovi Yidoni it's skila, maybe Afkan Beskila, maybe that was why he didn't like Mos Yumsa, because it left this possibility of changing up the capital punishment of Eshes Ish from Chenek to Skila. Says the Gemara, no, we wouldn't have had that concern because Mida Amar Rachmana Arusa Beskila, because we know that an Arusa, a woman who is an Arusa that a man sleeps with, so that's Skila, Michlal de Nesua La Beskila. We already know that she's not Beskila and she's going to be Bechenek. So we wouldn't have been confused about what the capital punishment would have been for Eshes Ish had it been that the limud, the gzeira shava from Ovi Yidoni was from the words of Mos Yumsu. Ve'ela, maybe perhaps it would have been another concern. Ve'ela make avi ve'imo kakashele. Maybe we're talking about the isser of make avi ve'imo, where as well we know that that capital punishment is chenek. If a child hits their parent, and again, whatever the parameters are, we're not learning that sugya, but if they hit them in a way where they're chayiv, so then that is chenek. But maybe we would have made an error. Maybe we would have said lemesiu the migmar me Ovi Yidoni. Maybe we should have learned it out from Ovi Yidoni. And then what's Ovi Yidoni? Skila. And because Mos Yumsu is both by Ovi Yidoni and by Maki Avi Ve'imo, perhaps we would have said that the onesh, the punishment by Maki Avi Ve'imo is not chenek, but rather it is skila. No, ad gamri me Ovi Yidoni ligmar me Eshes Ish. We didn't need to do that because it says Mos Yumas by Eshes Ish, and Eshes Ish is chenek, so we don't have to worry about that. That when we are dealing with capital punishments, we never go for being aggressive in regards to trying to find the most severe of those consequences. Granted, they all have the same conclusion of death, granted, but we always try to take the least severe of them, and that would be chenek. So even if it would have been that we tried to learn from the words of Mos Yumas by Ovi Yidoni to other Niskalin, we wouldn't have made a mistake by the case of Maka Avi Ve'imo, which is Chenek, and made that into Skila. Why? Because we have to stay low. We have to keep the least severe of all the consequences. Skila is at the top and Chenek is at the end. So I never would have learned from Ovi Yidoni, which is Skila. I would have learned Maka Avi Ve'imo from Eshes Ish, which is Chenek. It says the Gemara, that also can't be the concern. So Amar Le, the Gemara says, really, we're speaking broadly. we're talking about sha'ar haniskalin gufayu kokashele di bamos yumas gamre ad the gamre me'ovidoni ligmru me'eshes ish. The Gemara says the reason why we don't want to use the pasuk of mos yumas is because mos yumas leaves us with the opportunity to make a drasha from the world of eshes ish, which is chenek. But the people who have skila should have skila. And we don't want to have the opportunity to incorrectly paskin and give them. It's not like we're mesupak. We know that they're niskalim. But if we learn from mos yumas, it makes it difficult to be done each case. Because when the words by ovidoni are mos yumas, well, guess what is also mos yumas? Eshes ish, which is chanek. So all the cases would have been very confusing. So that's why, says the Gemara, and I know that this is a bit of a difficult aspect of the sugya, but in short, we're going to summarize the first 10 minutes of tonight and the last 10 minutes of Shabbos, where we learn this sugya of within the world of Ovidoni. Which part of the pasuk do we learn from to make our Gzeira Shabbat? Do we learn from Demehem Bam, or do we learn from Mos Yumasu? And we conclude, paskin's the wrong word, we basically conclude that the limud is from Demehem Bam, because had we learned from Mos Yumsu, we would have had a lot of confusion with cases of skila, because if we had the words of Mos Yumsu, those words also exist by Eshes Ish, which is chenek, and we would have been confused about other cases of skila. That's why we learn the cases of Niskalan from the world of Demehem Bam. Says the Gemara, Elu hein haniskalan. Here are all of the cases, seemingly the presentation of an exhaustive list of those who get skila. Haba'al ha'im, a person who sleeps with his mother. Ve'al eshes aviv, a person who sleeps with his father's wife, a stepmother. Ve'al hakala, a person that sleeps with his daughter-in-law. Ve'al ha'zachor, if a man cohabits with another man. Ve'al ha'behema, bestiality, that's if a man violates a female animal. Ve'isha ha'mevia es ha'behema, a woman who creates a scenario where she is violated by a male animal, the hamagadev, one that violates blasphemy, the oved avodas kochavim, someone who does avodah zara, and look at this interesting distinction, the hanose mizar lemolech. So here, some of the Rishonim write that this is not avodas kochavim, and we're going to discuss this down the road. That is what Rashi here highlights this on the right side here, halfway down. We'll get into this later, but here obviously it's not part of avodas kochavim because it has a different delineation in the Mishnah. What? What?
All these categories.
Well, they are, but it's not like the Torah says Elohein Haniskalan. It's not clear because it's Mos Yumsu, right? Many of these cases just say Mos Yumas, and we don't know what that means. We need Chazal to interpret what type of capital punishment they deserve. But yes, this is like Parshas Harayos that we read on Yom Kippur. Like all of the. It's true that the cases are clear, but it's not always clear what capital punishment we get. So this Mishnah, the Torah is esoteric. The Mishnayos are going to be more crystallized. About Ovid, only these are people who are Dorish as Hamesim. They have some ways of communicating with the dead. Obviously, we know famously that you're chayav skila. A person who curses their parents. If a man cohabits with a woman who's engaged to another man, and let's just remember, we're not talking about our engagement. Our engagements are zeros. We're talking about kedushin with a ring. Harat mekudeshesli. V'hamesis, a person who convinces one other person to violate halacha or to worship avodah zarah. V'hamediach from irani dachas, someone who convinces many people to violate halacha. V'machashev, a sorcerer. Uben sorer umore. That's our list. All of these people are chayiv skila for their actions. Now what we're going to do is go through that list one little bit at a time. So what was our first case in the Mishnah? Habal ha'im. Here we go. Habal ha'im. If a man cohabits with his mother, chayav aleha mishum aim umishum eshes av. Oh, double relationship, right? So he is.
And therefore what? Right.
Huh?
And therefore what?
So very good. So take a look at Rashi. Rashi here says at the beginning, where's the Rashi? Habal ha'im. Rashi is 5 lines before the wide lines. Look what Rashi says, the shogeg. And therefore, chayav aleh shtei chatos. We're not talking about a case where you did so intentionally. Well, we're analyzing the case of habal ha'im. Had you done so b'mezid, you'd be chayav skila. Had you done so b'shogeg, you're right. The Mishnah is bifurcating a little bit And it makes the Mishnah, it's like layered, right? It's rich, it's layered, and it's complex. But that's what Rashi delineates over here, is that we're not talking about a case of Mazik. Here we're talking about a case of if what? It's machlokes tanoim, but so that's what the Tanna Kama holds, that Abo ala aim chayev aleha mishum aim umishum eish esav, because the man has a double relationship to this woman. He has a standing isser to cohabit with his mother and a standing isser to cohabit with his father's wife. Happens to be she's the same woman, but it's shtei chatos, which is fascinating because it's one Maisa. Okay, so over this we've discussed this behalamachas and Shabbos. We had these back in the day. Now that's the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and we're 10 lines from the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Eino chayev ela mishum ha'eim bilvad. We will be spending much of today trying to figure out how Rabbi Yehuda got to that conclusion that it's only about the aim. Why isn't it about the Eishes Av? Fascinating. On its own, difficult, we couldn't even process. Right? We can hear the halacha, but to know why requires work. Next case, Habo al Eishes Av. Let's say a man cohabits with his stepmother. Chayiv mishum Eishes Av or mishum Eishes Ish. Now it's not your mother. By the way, why didn't we say a triple Isser by a man sleeping with his mother, his father's wife, and Eishes Ish? We didn't say that. Right? We didn't say that. I don't know why. The Gemara just doesn't say it. The Mishnah doesn't say it. But we see that there's a double Isser, because think about it, there is a triple relationship, in fact, a triple Isser for a man to sleep with his mother, which is Aim, Eishes Av, and Eishes Ish. Those are all different Isurim. What?
I'm saying it does say it, so maybe it's not necessarily father not knowing.
We'll see soon in the Mishnah that won't matter, actually. The Isser still stands. Even posthumously, a person cannot cohabit with his father's wife.
But it's not Ish.
At that point, it's not Eishes Ish. But, you're solving that problem. Could be, or it could be that Eishes, no.
I was trying to figure out.
I was going to say maybe Eishes Av and Eishes Ish are synonyms, like that it's one or the other, but that's not true because this case is not that way. Okay, so the Gemara says if a man is with Eishes Av, then chayiv mishum Eishes Av mishum Eishes Ish, bein b'chaye aviv bein la'achar misas aviv bein min ha'erus and bein min hanisuin, both during the father's life and posthumously, and whether or not his marriage to this woman was only kiddushin or if it was even nisuin. Haba'al kalaso, a man who cohabits with his daughter-in-law. Chayev aleha mishum kalaso umishum eishes ish. Bein b'chaye b'no, bein la'achar misas b'no, bein min ha'eris and bein min hanisuin. So there too we see a multiple layered isser. What's unique is that Rabbi Yehuda only argues in the case of aim. Rabbi Yehuda only argued where we said that Habal ha'aim chayev aleha mishum aim umishum eishes aviv. Rabbi Yehuda omer eino chayev ela mishum aim bilbad. In the other cases, he doesn't say anything. That's again we said. Just trying to figure out Rabbi Yehuda is a big avoda, and we're going to do that today. Fair warning: this is not a walk in the park Gemara. This requires a lot of focus. Let's get started with the Gemara because the Gemara out of the gates is going to quote a brisa that makes Rabbi Yehuda's shita and our Mishnah seem to not be the same Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im lo hayasa imo reuya la'aviv, if the marriage to the father wasn't ra'ui, lo hayasa imo reuya la'aviv, if his mother was not supposed to be married to the father, eino chayev ela mishum ha'ein bilvad. Now this is obviously not the same as our Rabbi Yehuda. Our Rabbi Yehuda doesn't make a distinction between hayasa reuya la'aviv or not. Ours says there's a double isser. And here we see that you're only going to have the double isser if there was a marriage that's roi. So says the Gemara, my eino ru'uya lo. What kind of marriage are we talking about that's eino ru'uya lo? This is Yevamos-esque. If you want to say that the marriage is a marriage that's an isser kares, or if you want to say that they're chayve misos bezdin, that one of these people is destined to die, they've already been paskin upon. This whole Masechta has been about this. Chayve misos bezdin. Michlal, if Rabbi Yehuda holds that way, what does that imply about the Rabbanan? Michlal de Rabbanan savre that afal gav de eino ru'uya lo that you're chayiv shtayim. That's impossible. Nobody could hold that a marriage that's chayiv kares is chal. The marriage is a zero. Nothing happened. Hales le kiddushin begava. The diuk is an impossible diuk. Is that if Eino Ru'uya Lo of Rabbi Yehuda means that the marriage is on a bedrock of krisus or of chayve misos bezdin, that's not chal. So the Gemara says that can't be what Ein Ru'ya Lo means. Ela chayve lavin. Oh, we're talking about an Isser Lav. What's that? What does that mean? Okay, so there's an Isser D'Oraisa for the couple to marry, but it's not on the bedrock of a Chiyuv Kares. And therefore, Rabbi Huda Savar La, Rabbi Akiva, this is a nice Shas concept that we've seen numerous times in Shas. On the side here, it's short changes us. It only says Yevamos Daf Yud. We've seen this Shita dozens of times. Ki Rabbi Akiva, the Amar Ein Kiddushin Tofsin B'chayve Lavin. The Kiddushin is not Chal. When I was growing up, one of my classmates, his mother was divorced and a Kohen married her. According to Rabbi Akiva, they're not married. They're Chayve Lavin. It's an Isser D'Oraisa. Zero. Not who was your Shegetz Misada Kedushin. Nothing. You're not married. That's how Rabbi Akiva held. And Rabbi Yehuda holds that way as well. And the Rabbanan don't hold that way, which is why they hold that there's two Isurim. Because Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not a marriage. The Rabbanan say no, even if it's Chayve Lavin, but they're still married. Okay, they're doing an Isser, but it's still Chal. So that's the Machlokas, Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. And that Machlokas is brought here between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim in our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, no way. Masiv Reb Oshaya. We have a brisa. This brisa is in Yevamos, and we learned it a long time ago. Isser mitzvah ve'isser kedusha. When we are talking, we're going to define these terms because in the Gemara they're not clear. When we talk about an isser mitzvah or an isser kedusha, choltzos v'lo misyavos. When we're in a scenario where yibum is shaykh, right? Ruvain married Rachel. Ruvain died. Rachel didn't have kids. Rachel now marries Ruvain's brother Shimon. But if there's an Isser Mitzvah marriage or an Isser Kedusha marriage, they're not allowed to do Yibum, Rachel, and Shimon. They have to do Chalitza. Let's turn to the top of Nun Gimel Amud Beis and figure out what these terminologies mean. Isser Mitzvah, what is that? The marriage of an Isser Mitzvah is when it's Shnios Midivrei Sofrim. We learned about this in detail in Maseches Yevamos about marriages that are Asser Midrabanan. So here, Isser Mitzvah in that brisa means that if the marriage between Rachel and Ruvain's brother Shimon in Yibum, if that marriage were to take place, it would be an Isser Derabanan, then we don't allow for the Yibum to take place. The Isser Derabanan status of the marriage overrides the ability to do Yibum, and instead we do Chalitza. Now, Ve'amai karu lehu Isser Mitzvah. Why did the brisa refer to this marriage of Shnios Midivrei Sofrim as Isser Mitzvah? Shem Mitzvah Lishmoa Divrei Chachamim. You did an Isser about the mitzvah of listening to the Chachamim. What about Isser Kedusha? There too we said that by Isser Kedusha, that if the nature of the marriage is an Isser Kedusha between Rachel and Shimon, the Yibum marriage, then we also don't allow it. But what is that? Isser Kedusha is a case of Almana L'Kohen Gadol, Grusha V'Chalutza L'Kohen Hedya. Ve'amai karu lehu Isure Kedusha. Why is it that the Chachamim, that the Brisa referred to this kind of a marriage, the Isser type of marriage, as an Isser of Kedusha? Because you should be holy people. Okay, we haven't gotten to our question yet. The Tani Allah, what does the Brisa say about this? Rabbi Huda Machlef. Rabbi Huda says the Isser Mitzvah is not talking about Shnios Midivrei. So from that's talking about the Almana L'Kohen. He flipped the terminologies. But Chilufi Huda the Machlef, HaChalitza Baya. But Rabbi Huda is Rabbi Akiva Jew, which means that there's an Isser Lav that the Kedushin is not Chal. What do we see here? Yes, you're right. Chilufi Yehuda Machlef. He switched the Shitas that Isser Mitzvah was talking about Kohen and Isser Kedusha was talking about Shnios Lareus. But Chalitza Baya. But he said that you still need Chalitza. V'Yisalka Daitach Rabbi Yehuda ki Rabbi Akiva Sviralei. But if Rabbi Yehuda is really Rabbi Akiva Jew, then I don't understand. Michti. Chayve Lavan Rabbi Akiva ki Chayve Krisus Tami. V'Chayve Krisus Lavan Chalitza b'Yibum Ninu. Why are you telling me he's even Chayve and Chalitza? If what you're saying is that even according to the Chiluf, that Rabbi Akiva holds, Rabbi Yehuda, holds, that Isser Mitzvah is talking about a marriage that's Asser, a Grusha to a Kohen Gadol. So what do you mean you're Chayv and Chalitza? There's no Chalos. Rabbi Akiva says they're not married at all. Because Chayve Lavin, there's Ein Kedushin Tovsin. So Rabbi Yehuda, we have a question. Answers the Gemara, no. No. Rabbi Yehuda is not saying that that's his shita, that there's a chalos of marriage. He's just saying that the Tanakama messed up the terms. So here's what I, the Tanakama said, I'm teaching a brisa. Isser mitzvah is talking about shnios l'divrei sovra. Isser kedusha is talking about a grusha marrying Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you got the terms backwards. That wasn't Rabbi Yehuda talking about his own shita. He was just giving a course correction to the Tanakama. L'dvar of the Tanakama kamar v'lei lo svira. Oh, so good. So now we have done over here. We asked a little kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Does he in fact hold the Rabbi Akiva? We concluded yes, he does. Now we have to get into the big sugya of the day. This is going to cover a lot of ground, and it will certainly take us on to Nun Dal Amid Aleph. If I have my way, we'll get to the Mishnah by Nun Dal Amid Aleph. I hope everybody davened early. Whatever. I don't really have a choice, so we have to we have to do what we got to do. So let's move as thoroughly as we can. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down on Nun Gimel Amud Beis. Ki asa Rabbi Yitzchak, Tani Kiditnan. Rabbi Yitzchak had the version of Rabbi Yehuda that was like our Mishnah. Remember when we started our Gemara, we brought a version of Rabbi Yehuda that was like a little more complex about the Einu Ru'uya? That wasn't Rabbi Yitzchak's version. Ki asa Rabbi Yitzchak, he said, Tani Kiditnan, our Mishnah, his brisa was like our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Eino Chai V'ele Mishum Ha'im Bilvad. So our Mishnah told us that the Tanakama that said that when a man cohabits with his mother, he violates two Isurim. He violates one in two directions. One is that it's his mother, and the other is that it's his father's wife. And that's a double Isur. Remember, as you pointed out, David, it didn't really make sense. We're talking about Skila, and the Rashi on the Mishnah said, we're talking about a Din Shogeg, Shtei Chatos. Now, the time of my, these two words will generate 50 lines of Sugya. Why, maybe even how, did Rabbi Yehuda come up with this Shita that there's only one track of Isser? And why is it aim and not Eshes Av? Are you prioritizing the nature of the Isser of cohabiting with a mother? I do agree that cohabiting with a mother sounds worse to me than cohabiting with your father's spouse. I agree. But halachically, how did you get there? What was the mental gymnastic, the halachic gymnastics to get us there? 3 answers. And the first 2 don't work. Says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, do Amar Kra, Imchahi, she's your mother. And because it says Imchahi in the Pasuk, Mishum Imo Atamechayvo, the Atamechayvo Mishum Eshesab. It's not because of any logic that we are going to come up with. It's Gzeres HaKasuv. The Torah said Imchahi, and because of the language of Imchahi that shows us that the Isser between the son and the mother is a more powerful, I don't know, it's a priority. I mean, we need Rishonim for this. A prioritized Isser. It's a little difficult to say, no?
I mean, just gonna have cases where it's Isha's where it's one or the like it could be your aim or not your aim, but if it's your aim, that's the only way. Like, why would the Torah say to do that if it's not, teaching to be more?
Well, when it is your aim, you have a double connection to that woman.
But like, you could have that case where she's Isha's where she's not your aim. To say that
we're going to discuss that too. A regular stepmother has her own Isser, but in that it's Eshes Av, Gila Knaf Aviv. I'm maskim. But the current here that's bothering me is that why is this Isser being prioritized over Eshes Av? I don't.
Otherwise, there's no reason for the Torah to write it at all.
Which one?
Aim.
No, because let's say there is no father. Father's dead. Or I can tell you from my profession, a woman does. She goes to a sperm bank and she buys Zerav, tall, dark, and handsome. But that's a mother, but that's not a father.
She carried it.
Yeah. No, not surrogacy. That's Nacha case. But if let's say that a woman, Ben Sira in the Gemara, no intercourse, but she had a baby, no father. That's aim, straight up. So we can come up with iterations. This is me. I don't know if I'm right. I'm just saying it bothers me a little bit. But the Gemara is saying, don't worry. The pasuk says imchahi. So between the two isurim, it's imchahi, and that's the drasha that we just saw that Abai wants to postulate. Imchahi mishum imo atamechaybo. This is the diuk. Imcha is a limit. It's only your mother. V'yatamechaybo mishum eshasav. So if a person cohabits with his mother b'shogeg, which is shver, how do you cohabit with your mother b'shogeg? Fine. The Gemara says even if that happens, so then lamaisa you only have one iser. Hold on 1 second, Abaya. You want to say that because state in pasuk imchahi that therefore the only korban shogeg you're going to bring for b'shogeg cohabiting with your mother is that elameata ervas. Look at this. Ervas eshes avicha lo segale. What are the next words? Ervas avichahi. Hi mishum eshes avatamachayvo. Viatamachayvo mishum imo. So that's a problem. If the language of imchahi is the limiting factor that makes me say that the mother is the isser and I have to bring a korban for that, but not for Eshes Ab, the next pasuk, well, I don't know if it's the next pasuk, but the pasuk also says avichahi. So then it should be the opposite direction, Ella, and then the Gemara starts to make its distinctions. This next 3-4 lines requires a lot of time, which we're not going to do, but we're 2 lines before the white lines. Ella imo shehi eshes aviv koi hacha umemaitla. When it comes to your mother, who is your father, it's like a regular, healthy, normal family, right? So then, in such a case, there's a mute. And then in this other case, where it's not your mother, just a stepmother, there's also a miyut. Hashda, here's how this plays out. Let's just follow these next 2 lines and then we'll understand the problem with Abaye. Hashda, imo she'eno eshes aviv mechayev. If there is a mother and she's not your father's wife, let's say the example, Ben Sira, right? She conceived in a way that didn't require Tash Meshemit, only aim. What? 100%. Yeah, very good. Yeah, it was intercourse, but the father wasn't adultery. It'd have to be a goy though. Okay. Yeah. Zir mas susim zir masam. So by them we wouldn't. There's no relationship there. Right? These recordings then a mother who is not my father's wife, then there's a chiyuv. Eshes aviv she'eno imo chayev, and a pure stepmother is chayev. But then that leaves the oddest of all implications, which is that imo shehi eshes aviv lo mechayev klal. Listen to this. When we have the words imchahi and avichahi, they're both limiters. If both of the limiters apply in the cases of a pure mother who's not my father's wife and a pure stepmother who's not my mother, then that leaves this implication that imoshi eshes aviv lo mechayev klal, that there's no korban for a man who sleeps with his regular mother, happy-go-lucky prairie family, it's just a couple that had kids, and the child, then there's no korban? How? It doesn't work. The diyukim of imchahi and avichahi are so strong that it leaves us with an impossibility that if a man cohabits with his mother, who is his blood father's, just a regular couple had a kid and the son, then there's no korban. That's the diyuk from imchahi and avichahi. It's impossible. But it's left as a question. Visu, and furthermore, l'Rabbana nami, according to the rabbis in our Mishnah, who said that a man who cohabits with his mother has 2 isurim, what about imchahi, aksiv imchahi? Ella, goodbye to the shita of Abaye. Because your diuk of imchahi doesn't work, because we also have avichahi, and of course the snowball questions that come out of that. It says the Gemara, no, don't worry about that question about the Rabbanon. This is a shita that we're not going to learn today. Just put an asterisk. We'll learn what this shita is another time. Hopefully today we'll see how things go. Rabbi Yehuda Nami, the same exact thing is true in regards to Rabbi Yehuda, where we want to say imchahi and make a diuk. Rabbi Yehuda Nami, we could use one of the avichahis and imchahis in order to not be left with these complex questions. So we kind of sort of have a path with Abaye. But all that is answer number 1. We're 2/3 of the way down, 4 lines into the wide lines. Answer number 2, how do we know that Rabbi Yehuda holds that when a man cohabits with his mother, that he only has the isser of aim and not the isser of eshes av? El Amar of Acha b'reider of Ika. Amar Kra ervasa. Mishum erva achas atamechayvo. V'i atamechayvo mishum shtei arayos. Mishtei ervos. Here the Gemara has a totally different sprach. It says ervasa, not ervoseha. It's just one. By the way, what does the Gemara not tell us? Why aim over eshes av? We don't know. The Gemara just says it's only one isser. So says the Gemara, that's a big problem. You can't say ervasa because elameata. If that's true, the word ervasa is used in other places also. Ervas kalascha lo segale. Your daughter-in-law's nudity, she can't be revealed. Eshes binchahi lo segale ervasa. Yet hachanami mishum erva achas tamachayvo via tamachayvo mishum shtei ervos, but that doesn't work. Why not? Because v'hatznan habal kalaso chayv aleha mishum kalaso mishum eshes ish bein b'chayiv beno bein la'achar bein b'chayiv beno bein la'achar misas beno v'lo poleg Rabbi Huda. You want to say that the reason why by Eshes aim, the word ervasa teaches me only one isser, but 2 lines later in our Mishnah, Nun Gimel Amid Aleph, it says that if a man cohabits with his daughter-in-law, there's 2 isurim. And what don't we see? We don't see Rabbi Huda kicking up the sand and saying, I disagree. So if your svara of Achabrei Rav Ika is that the word ervasa is the reason we know that Rabbi Huda holds that only one isser is employed, but you got to stay consistent. If ervasa is the reason that Rabbi Yehuda holds Eshes aim is that the aim is the Isser and not Eshes Aviv, that's fine, but stay consistent. So the next case in the Mishnah, the last case in the Mishnah, I should say, by Kala, there we see 2 Isurim. It has the word ervasa, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't argue. So that doesn't work either. So the Gemara says, great point. Elakevan dechad gufahi, since she's only one body, afal gav the trei isurinenhu. Even though there are 2 isurim taka, ksiv ervasa hachanami kevan the gufchadhu afal gav the trei isurinenhu ksiv ervasa. This doesn't work at all for Rabbi Yehuda. Well, not. There really are trei isurim. This is a rejection of Rav Acha B'rei Ravika. Let's learn answer number 3, 4 lines from the bottom. El Amar Rava. Kasava Rabbi Yehuda, why is it that Rabbi Yehuda holds that when a man cohabits with his mother, that he only has the Isser of aim and not the Isser of Eshes Av? When the pasuk says Ervas Avicha lo segale, what does it mean? Zu Eshes Avicha. What could Ervas Avicha mean? That a father and son cohabit. That's what it could have meant. That's actually pashtus in the pasuk that it means that. So says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda holds that when the pasuk says ervas avicha, it doesn't mean that a son cohabits with his father. Rather, it's about talking about the mother. Umaisi la b'gzeira shava that we're not going to learn until the next page. Umashma bein eshes aviv shehi imo bein eshes aviv she'eno imo. It seems to be that there would be an isser for a man to cohabit with his mother, whether or not she was Eshes Aviv, Bain, let me read that again. Umashma, Bain Eshes Aviv Shehi Imo, yes, my father's mother who's actually my mother, Bain Eshes Aviv She'eno Imo, or a pure stepmother. In both of those cases, that would be the Isser of Ervas Avicha, which is code word for Eshes Avicha. What about imo she'ena eshes aviv minayin? What about the case that Michael was saying earlier, that perhaps she was violated by a goy of some kind, ben sira, all these cases where she is my pure mother but not my father's wife. Talmud lomar ervas imcha lo segale imcha hi mishum imo atamachayvo v'atamachayvo mishum eshes aviv, and that's how we get to Rabbi Yehuda, that in a case where it's my mother purely, we only have one isser. Because the pasuk says, "Ervas imchahi lo segale imchahi." And so it's one limiting factor. That's the only answer, and this is considered an acceptable response for the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Easy peasy. And as we turn to the top of Nun Dalet and Aleph, we have a brisa. This is a lengthy brisa and a detailed brisa, and it will get us part of the way down to the Mishnah, which says as follows: Rava teaches us Tanya Kavase de Rava. Let's read the pasuk inside. I have the pasuk on the side. Vayikra Chaf Yud Aleph. V'ish asher yishkav es eshes aviv. If there is a man who lays with his father's wife, ervas aviv gila, he revealed the father's nakedness. Mos yumsu shnehem dmehem bam. Both of them need to die, and their blood is upon them. Says the Gemara, top line of Nun Dalet and Aleph. Tanya Kavase de Rava ish prat lakatan. When are we talking about this type of inappropriateness? A katan is not shaykh to this isser of mos yumsu. Asher yishkav es eshes aviv, that he would cohabit with his father's wife, mashma. This implies bein eshes aviv shehi imo, whether or not it's his pure mother, uvein eshes aviv shelo imo, whether or not it's a pure stepmother. Imo she'ena eshes aviv minayin. What if it's a mother who isn't the father's wife? So there, Talmud Lomar, like Rabbi Yehuda said, like we wanted to say in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, this was the third answer in the name of Rava. From the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Beis, Talmud Lomar, Ervas Aviv Gila. From the pasuk of Ervas Aviv Gila is mufne. That word, the word mufne means it's available to be used for a Gzera Shava. Mufne lahakish v'ladon mimenu gzera shava. The word is extraneous and we can use it. The Brisa continues, Mos Yumsu, this pasuk of a man cohabiting with his father's wife. What does Mos Yumsu mean? Beskila, that they get skila. Ata Omer beskila. Again, we're all in the Brisa still. You want to say that Mos Yumsu means skila. Oenu ela be'achas mikol misas hamuras b'Torah. Death means death. How do we know what kind of death we're talking about? So says the Gemara, because ne'emar kan mehem bam. Over here, this pasuk, Vayikra Chaf Yud Aleph, it says at the end of the pasuk that if a man cohabits with his father's wife, he's revealed his father's nakedness, he needs to die, and it says Dmeim Bam. Where else does it say Dmeim Bam? From the beginning of today's discussion. Also, V'ne'emar ba'ovi yidoni Dmeim Bam. Malahalan by ovi yidoni, the punishment is Beskila, Afkan Beskila. So that's the brisa so far. We've proved Rabbi Yehuda, we've proved Rava, and now we understand in our Mishnah from the bottom of Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, why is it that Rabbi Yehuda was of the opinion that if a man cohabits with his mother, that there's only one Isser, and the Gemara provided its answer from Rava, validated by a brisa in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, Onesh Shamanu, got it. I understand from this brisa that if a man were to cohabit with his mother, with his father's wife, that he would get skila. Azhara minayin. Of course, we've seen this in Shas before, that in order for the Torah to present properly an isser that is punishable, we need to know what the onesh is. In this case, we know dmehem bam from a gzera shava. We know that from ovi idoni back over here to the dmehem bam by the father cohabiting with his father's wife, that is skila. But we also need a proper warning in azhara. Where does the azhara come from? Says the Gemara, azhara minayin. Talmud Omar, Ervas Avicha lo segale. Ervas Avicha zu Eshes Avicha. That's talking about your father's wife. It says the words Ervas Avicha. So asks the Brisa. Again, all still in the Brisa. Ata Omer, 10 lines down, 2 lines before the wide lines, you say that Ervas Avicha means Eshes Avicha. O Eino Ella, perhaps the Brisa means Ervas Avicha Mamish. That maybe there, that pasuk's not left to be an azhara for cohabiting with a mother. Perhaps that pasuk is literally saying ervas avicha, that a son violated or didn't violate, cohabited with his father. So says the Gemara, can't be. Ne'emar kan ervas avicha lo segale, v'ne'emar lahalan ervas aviv gila. Ma lahalan beishus hakasav medaber. Just like when the pasuk says ervas aviv gila, it's clear from that context that it's talking about the spouse of, it's ishus, it's male-female intercourse. It's not talking about sodomy. It's not talking about two men together. Mishkav zachar. Malahalan b'ishus kasam medaber. Afkan, even when it says ervas avicha, that's b'ishus kasam medaber. That's how we know it's not talking about the father, but rather it's talking about the father's wife. That is our azhara. Very good. So now we have a well-rounded sugya. We know that there is the onesh of skila. We learned that from Dmehem Bam, a Gzera Shava, from our pasuk of cohabiting with a mother back to Ovi Idoni. Good. We also know that we have our azhara, which is a pasuk that says Ervas Avicha Lo Segale, and we know that that's not talking about a father and son being together because we have a Nacha Gzera Shava, so we're good to go. Umashma, what's implied from this brisa? Bein Eshes Aviv Shehi Imo, Bein Eshes Aviv She'eno Imo, whether or not the son is cohabiting with a woman who's actually his mother or purely a stepmother. Imo She'eno Eshes Aviv Minayin. How do we know that if a man cohabits with his mother and there is no father in the picture, obviously there's a father in the picture, but not a Jewish one. So says the Gemara, Talmud Omar Ervas Imcha Lo Segale. Says the Gemara that we learn that with the imo that it doesn't have a father, that's the Isser. Einli ella be'azhara she'asa hakasuv. Imo she'eno eshes aviv ki imo shehi eshes aviv. I understand the azhara she'asa hakasuv. The Torah made it that an imo she'eno eshes aviv, that a mother who is not the father's wife is similar to a mother who is the father's wife. But then onesh minayin. But then I don't know what the punishment is, because now the case is different. So says the Gemara, don't worry. We're about a quarter of the way down, 5 lines into the wide lines on Nun Daled Aleph. Ne'emar kan ervas avicha lo segale. V'ne'emar lahalan ervas aviv gila. Ma be'azhara. Just like when it comes to the azhara, the warning about the Isser, asa kasuv, the Torah equated imo she'eno eshes aviv, ki imo shehi eshes aviv. Just like the azhara applies broadly to the various iterations of what this woman is, a mother or a non-mother, a stepmother, af be'onesh, the same thing is true with the punishment. It's broadly applied as well. Asa kasuv imo she'eno eshes aviv ki imo shehi eshes aviv. So too, the azhara is broad and it applies to all iterations of the mother, stepmother or blood mother. Same is true with the onesh. Then the Torah says imchahi mishum imo atamachayvo v'i atamachayvo mishum eshes av. End of brisa. Very, very lengthy brisa and a complicated brisa. But what we see, hopefully with some degree of clarity, is that we see Rabbi Yehuda's shita showing its face. And what we don't see in this brisa is Rabbi Yehuda's name. We just see a brisa that seems to say imchahi as a limiter, so there's only one isser if a man cohabits with his mother, which is aim, and not both. Who's that a kashan? The Rabbanan in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that they're chayiv in both according to the Rabbanan. Only Rabbi Yehuda said it's one. Well, now we have a gorgeous brisa that says Rabbi Yehuda's right. So says the Gemara, Rabbanan. What are you going to do? We have a Gzeira Shava. The Gzeira Shava teaches us, in fact, that Rabbi Yehuda's right. So how can you stand on your little soapbox and say that there's two korbanos chatas that are brought if a man cohabits with his mother? One for the aim and one for Eshes Av. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan, because they learn the pasuk of Ervas Avicha Mamish. Totally different limud. That pasuk's not available for Gzeira Shava. The premise of the pasuk being available for Gzeira Shava is that when it said Ervas Avicha, it was talking about the wife and not the father. The Rabbanan say, read the pasuk kipshuto. The pasuk is talking about a son and a father who have mishkav zachar together. There's no Gzeira Shava. So therefore, the machlokes really between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan is, do we hold of this Gzeira Shava? Rabbi Yehuda says, of course. And the Rabbanan say, no way. We need that pasuk to teach us about the isser of a father and son being together, but mishkav zachar. Says the Gemara, hi, mives zachar nafka. We already learned about that. Rabbanan, we don't need you to learn this pasuk that way. We already know that the father and son have this isser. Says the Gemara, you're right. There's 2 isurim, say the Rabbanan, that if a father and son cohabit, then they have 2 isurim as well. Oh, I think I skipped a line. No, I didn't. L'chayav l'shtaim. Uchad Rabbi Yehuda. Dam Rabbi Yehuda. Nachri haba al aviv. We don't know who this Nachri is yet. It's not your classical Nachri, as we'll soon see. But a Nachri haba al aviv chayiv shtaim. Oh, this is exactly what the Rabbanan wanted to say. And as well, haba al achi aviv. If a man cohabits with his uncle, that would also be chayiv shtaim. Omar Rava. Rava is of the opinion. Mistabra milsad Rabbi Yehuda be Yisrael b'shogeg u'v'korban. When Rava taught us this idea of a Nachri, it was talking about a Yisrael who cohabited with him b'shogeg and with a korban. And that's why he had chayiv shtaim. Really, it was just lishna ma'al to call him a nachri, because Jews don't behave that way. That's what the Gemara says. This not.
It's not what we're doing here.
No, we're talking about Yidden, and there's no chiv on the nachri, pasha. But the lishna ma'alya is a dig. The lishna ma'alya, yeah, it's a dig. It's just saying that's not what Jews do. So the Gemara says, and the isal kedaitach nachri mamish. That's a big problem. If a nachri is a mishkav zacharnik, dino mai ninu k'talam. Death. Done. Okay. Betray katlasi. You're gonna kill him twice. We said in the brisa that you're chayav shtaim. My high chayav shtaim if it's a nachri. It's ketala. There's no. He has one isser, and what is the isser? It falls under Gilui Arayos, right? Aleph Beis Gimel Daled Hey Vav. Ever Minachai Birkas Hashem Gezel Gilui Arayos Din Hereg and Avodah Zarah. So this is the first Gimel. A guy is not allowed to have Mishkav Zachar. That's not. He's Ketala. So the Brisa can't be talking about a guy. It has to be Lishna Ma'al Yehuda Nakat for a Yid to say Jews don't behave that way. And the Nachri is talking about Israel B'Shogeg with a korban. Tanya Nami Hachi, we have a brisa that supports this. It's so late. Let's push. Tanya Nami Hachi, the brisa says, Habal Aviv Chayiv Shtaim, if a person cohabits with his father, 2 Yisurim, Habal Achi Aviv Chayiv Shtaim, like we saw, Ikadamri Delok Rabbi Yehuda, Ikadamri Filu Tema Rabbi Yehuda, 2 different ways to learn Rabbi Yehuda, like we saw above with the Nachri Kamer. And we learn this from a Kal V'chomer about an uncle. If we have a brisa that's saying that a man is chayiv shtaim for cohabiting with his father's brother, what do you think is going to happen when he cohabits with his father? Pasha that it's going to be a double issur. The only machlokas that exists over here is whether or not we say mar savar onshin min adin umar savar ein onshin min adin. The only machlokas is whether or not we're ma'anesh based on a Kal V'chomer. That's a whole different sugya. That's a parallel sugya. The Gemara touches on this, and we're not getting into this at all. V'Rabbanan as azharas le'eshes aviv minalahu. The Rabbanan have to learn the whole brisa from above differently because they don't believe in the Gzeira Shava. If they don't believe in the Gzeira Shava, then they have a lot of work to do. How do they learn the azhara of eshes aviv? Nafku me'ervas eshes avicha lo segale. They learn it from the pasuk of Erebas Isha Sevicha Lo Segala. Rabbi Yehuda, what do you do with that pasuk? Well, that pasuk is being used for something else. Rabbi Yehuda says that pasuk of Erebas Isha Sevicha Lo Segala mi boyd leila azharas laishes aviv la'achar misa, to teach us that posthumously one's not allowed to be with the wife of a father. V'Rabbanan, where do you learn that din that posthumously one is not allowed to be with the wife of a father? V'Rabbanan umi seifa dekra nafka Erebas Avichahi. He learns it from that pasuk. I Rabbi Yehuda. What about those words? Erebas Avichahi. Mishum eshes ab atamechayvo v'atamechayvo mishum eshes ish. That was a fundamental din that we saw in our Gemara. Wait 1 second. Rabbi Yehuda, you can't say that. You can't say that if a person is cohabiting with eshes av that you're mechayv, but you're not mechayv because of eshes ish. V'anon tnan habal eshes av. Chayav la mishum eshes av mishum eshes ish ben mechayav ben laachar misas aviv v'lo palig Rabbi Yehuda. In that case, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda was silent. So Rabbi Yehuda, you can't say that. So Amar Abai, don't worry, palig bebrisa. He argued in the brisa. We're just going to carry over his mouth. He didn't say it in the Mishnah, but he does agree in the Mishnah. That means that according to this in our Mishnah, when we learned our third case in our Mishnah, Nun Gimel Amanaf, that said Haba al Eshes Aviv, it should say after that case Rabbi Yehuda palig. We just didn't put it in because we assumed you knew the brisa. Very risky to leave it out, but that's what the Gemara says. V'Rabbanan, rabbis. Okay, so that's what they said. That he says that his teacher said there's only one issur. Ela Rabbanan minalahu. V'Rabbanan onesh te'eshes aviv la'achar misa minalahu. How do we know the onesh of achar misa? Bishlama Rabbi Yehuda ma'isi la b'gzeir shava. We already said Rabbi Yehuda holds of the gzeir shava. What about the Rabbanan? El Rabbanan minalu amar lach hahu me'ervas aviv gila demapik la Rabbi Yehuda l'gzeir shava mapik le'inhu la'onesh te'eshes aviv la'achar misa. So whereas that pasuk of ervas aviv gila Rabbi Yehuda uses for the gzeir shava, punk right there, they take that pasuk that's part of the gzeir shava. The Rabbanan use it to teach us to onesh of pastamis tashmish amita. Well, I should be careful to say that it's onesh the onesh of tashmish amita of a son to the stepmother after the father died is still going to have an onesh. V'Rabbanan onesh le'imo she'eno eshes aviv minalahu. How do we know about the onesh of a son who cohabits with a mother who's not the father's wife? Amar Rav Shisha Brei Rav Idi Amar Kra Imchahi Asa Kasav le'imo she'eno eshes aviv ke'imo she'i eshes aviv. The Torah equates this woman as imchahi. Imchahi. And the Gemara equates that the stepmother and the mother are similar, therefore the onshim are the same. I recognize there's a lot of back and forth here. If you take a piece of paper and you write down all the psukim, it's a gorgeous, perfect little sheet. Every little piece of pasuk is perfectly darshaned. One Rabbi Yehuda column, one Rabbanan column. It would be great to make this if we had an extra hour. We don't. Says the Gemara, lastly for today, Abal Kalaso, if a man cohabits with his daughter-in-law, why are you not saying that it's Eshes Beno? So it says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, Pasach HaKasu Bekala, so V'sayin Be'eshes Beno. The pasuk started with the Kala, and it ended with the wife of the son. Lomar Lach, Zuhi Kalaso, Zu Eshes Beno. It's the same exact person, and there are not two chiyuvim. This requires Rishonim. Why is this any different than the Rabbanan in our Mishnah? Not for tonight. We'll stop right here at the Mishnah. Sorry for the long shiur. We just have to catch up. Wishing you all a beautiful night.